Welcome back to Internal Affairs, a police podcast here with the IA guy. And back at it again, Coach Six with Pat Mahoney. Pat, what's going on, brother?
What's going on? How are you?
AKA Street Dude. Hey, man, let's break this video down before we get started. Let me set up the stage for you. Number one, it's going viral. So Pat and I had to talk about this, man, we got to get this on because there's some lessons learned and there's going to be some takeaways. So let me set it up for you this way. So this is from Yahoo Sports. Here's the headline. Jacksonville Sheriff's Office begins administrative review of altercations between deputies and fans at Georgia's win over Florida. So we're taking you to the wonderful state of Florida, in the city of Jacksonville, at the home of the Gators, right?
Yes, sir.
Go Gators against the Bulldogs. Huge game. And we all know fans just take it to another level. And there's a whole bunch of stuff. And what you're about to watch is, I think it's like less than 2 minutes, what we have so far. And I want to make this disclaimer very, very clear. We are going to break down only what the video depicts of someone who actually was filming. And so you have a male white who was in the stands, and next you know, he's approached by two police officers, and this is what happened. Take a look.
I'm not going to jail. You stop me.
That's assault! That's assault! That's assault! That's assault! That is assault! You can't do that! You can't do that! You can't do that! That's assault! That's assault! That's a lawsuit, bitch! That's a lawsuit!
Okay, Pat, man, first and foremost, you've ever experienced anything like this in the past?
I have. Yeah, I have.
Would you kindly share with us what you experienced?
I've worked quite a few venues, quite a few events, both on the EMS and law enforcement side. So, you know, it can get real rowdy. It can get rowdy at these games. And the bigger the game, the crazier the fans get.
Now, just to be clear, why don't we, before we start getting into the actual application of force and all that good stuff, when you work these events, because I also was, I know a little thing or two. I worked Dodger Stadium for 3 years. There's a certain protocol by which uniform officers are to abide by, right? And I can tell you from my experience, but maybe you can kind of walk us through or paint us a picture of what it is when you decide that a person who is, I should say a licensee, right? A person who is there watching the game and decides to commit a crime because there was an assault. Let's get that out of the way. Multiple reports saying that he assaulted another innocent bystander and he was going to get ejected, kicked out of the stadium. Kind of walk us through or maybe paint a picture for us.
Yeah, so I mean, the venues that I've worked in the past, typically things were handled by security. You know, everything was kind of handled at the lowest level first, and uniformed law enforcement officers only came in if security wasn't able to handle the issue, or there was an allegation of a crime that had occurred. So typically, maybe you're more disorderly, intoxicated subjects. Someone just causing a problem would be handled by security. But if there was a crime that was alleged to have occurred, police would step in to handle the situation and conduct the investigation.
Right. And from my experience, we have like 3 layers of response, if you will. First, you have like the yellow shirts who work the actual aisles and they work the actual section, who would come up to the individual and say, hey, sir, ma'am, you know what? We need to speak to you. Can you please come up to the concourse? Because what we're trying to do is get them away from that actual, where the seats are and the way it's angled, so many different things that we can talk about. If that person says, you know what, F off, the hell with you, I'm not gonna go, then we bring in polo shirts is what we call them. They actually wear polo shirts to security. They're actually off-duty law enforcement officers who pretty much are probably gonna go hands-on if you don't comply and say, hey, we're gonna go to the concourse because the ultimate goal is to actually eject you, right? To have you leave the premises. And last but not least, if that person, the suspect says, yeah, F off, I'm not gonna go with the program, then comes uniform. But again, that's just like a protocol. Of course, in real life, things happen. There is movement, there is deviations, and sometimes just uniform comes down and says, hey, you know what, sir? I suppose the goal is to get out of the actual section and end up at the concourse. What do you think?
Yeah, I would agree with that. My experience has been pretty similar, but the overall goal is always to remove the person from the situation, get them at least somewhere where there's a little less stimulus, and then figure it out from there, depending on how the venue wants to proceed or how any victim of a crime wants to proceed.
Right. Well, let's get right into this particular incident itself. Look, let's talk about the position of advantage, if you will. Talk to me about how this went down and what stood out the most from this incident.
So the first thing that stood out to me was one, the guy appeared to be a pretty big guy, right? And now you're dealing with arena style seating in which they're layered, they're stepped, and ascending. And the one officer places himself below the subject that they're trying to talk with, which to me, that puts you at a position of disadvantage. You never want to fight uphill. You always want to fight downhill, or at least on the same level as the person that you're dealing with, right? Because gravity wins every single time.
Right. No, totally. It just seems as though if you decide to get it on right there and then, it somehow, some way, you're going to try to keep your balance. And bro, you're in the middle of a Donnybrook. For all those that don't know the term Donnybrook, that's, for us, it's like fighting. You're basically fighting, which is fine. I'm all with that, by all means. But hey, man, let's get cuffs on, arrest them, and get them out of the bleachers, right out of this section, and get them into the concourse. And the ultimate goal is kick them out, bro. But again, from what we know in the video, they just showed this. It depicts just this particular part of this whole incident. Let me ask you this, Pat. In terms of a position of advantage, let me ask you this before we get into the position of advantage, because we kind of already talked about that. Creating the exigency, who do you think did that?
Well, you hear the suspect say, or the subject, I don't want to call him a suspect, but you hear the subject say, I'm not leaving. When you're dealing with intoxicated subjects, sometimes it's extremely difficult. You can talk to them, verbal judo all you want. They're not going to comply, which puts you in a real conundrum, right? However, this situation kind of seemed to be a little exacerbated by the law enforcement officers maybe taking the use of force a little too high, a little too soon. That's my personal opinion. Yeah. Whether they were justified based on their agency policy and what they did is another story. That's for the IA to determine.
Yes.
But my personal opinion, I would have gone around it a different way and maybe formulated a little bit of a better plan before I approached the subject.
Yeah. Yeah. And for all we know, and again, I'm going to keep saying this throughout this whole breakdown, is there's probably more to the video than we don't know. In formulating a plan, super important. Communicating, letting your partner know, okay, what exactly are we going to try to do here? Are we going to approach? And if he's overcoming our resistance while we're trying to handcuff him, chances are we're going to have to get it on, and maybe right there and then on the stairs, shit, I don't know, cuff them up and then just carry them up to the concourse. It just seems as though you probably needed more than just them two. And maybe there wasn't others available. Who knows?
Correct, maybe, and it's tight quarters. Those aisles are real narrow. The stairs are real steep, so nothing's perfect.
Yeah.
Things are, that's a real tough situation to be in. I've always found in my experience that, ask, tell, take.
Yeah.
Ask them to leave, give them the lawful order that they need to leave. They still refuse. Sometimes the best answer is always the simplest answer.
Yeah.
Grab him by the arm, stand him up, escort him. If he begins to tense or push back, you could execute a takedown, maybe try and detain there. Or I've done this a million times. I'm sure you have. I grab the top, you grab the bottom. We drag them out into the hallway, and you cuff them there.
Yeah.
The last thing you want to do is get into a brawl up in the steps with other people surrounding you as well.
Yes, 100%. It's interesting you say AT&T. We in the academy call it ATD, ask, tell, and do. That's how we roll. Which, by the way, it's what we call de-escalation today.
Yeah.
And it just seems as though there wasn't really much de-escalating that was done, if you will. Because talk to me about the taser reliance, because he goes right to the taser, man.
We don't know for sure. Nothing confirmed as to why the officer maybe decided to lead with the taser. He, the video shows him approach with the taser, and he does give himself a pretty good reactionary gap. To me, just looking at that at face value, it says to me, maybe this guy did assault somebody else, and the officer felt that he was going to be assaulted as well.
Correct.
However, in my career, I've seen a ton of officers that rely on the taser without contemplating what those second and third order effects of that taser are going to be. For those not familiar with the taser, it only gives you the ride for 5 seconds. So after 5 seconds, if you don't have a plan formulated, or you're not putting yourself in a position of advantage with that suspect, you're back at square one.
Yeah.
And, in my own career, I've seen the taser fail numerous times. I've had it fail on me numerous times. It's not the most reliable thing. But I do see, and it's commonly known in the industry, that a lot of officers are afraid to go hands-on, and they'll rely on the taser. And when the taser does not provide that kind of pain compliance they're looking for,
correct,
officers seem to get stuck in, oh no, what do I do now?
Right. And in addition to that, went for the taser, it was deployed. Look, as long as you can articulate the deviation from whatever that policy is, we're good. You're right. There is real life variables, such as being at this major college football game, having people around you. It's very steep. There's seats, and you don't want to approach. Yet you deployed the taser with the intentions of getting compliance, or him going, whatever. Okay, I want to leave now. Cuff him up and take him up the stairs into the concourse and out of the stadium. However, after that came a Donnybrook, bro. That's it. We're at it. Hands on. We're going at it. And talk to me about the strikes.
So, yeah, even before the strikes, you could see that the officer attempted to tase him multiple times.
Correct.
And the suspect's just tearing him out, whether they got good connections or not, or maybe sometimes it just doesn't work. And he had his handcuffs in his hand. He approached to detain him, and the subject pushed away a little bit, and the one officer just began punching. Whether or not he knew he had his handcuffs in his hand while he was punching, we don't know. That's for the IA to determine. But at the same time, you're now using a blunt weapon to strike someone in the head, which, if you're familiar with the use of force, you're actually not allowed to use blunt force weapons and strike to the head.
Yeah.
With your ass baton, that's considered lethal force. With 40 millimeter sponge rounds, it's considered lethal force. So you do have to be careful about what, your surroundings and what's in your hands when you decide, I'm going to start throwing some strikes.
Yeah, no, totally. I couldn't agree with you more. I'm with you. I don't necessarily think that in his compelled interview, while he's probably watching the video, you know what? I didn't even know that my handcuffs were actually open. He's just trying to put cuffs on him and take him out, man. That's, take him out of the stadium. That's the ultimate goal. However, of course, it didn't look all that well. It looks ugly, and that's fine. I get that. As a matter of fact, before I forget, there is another video that's going viral in the same game. Probably different officers. We haven't determined that yet, and I don't want to speculate too much. And again, that one's pretty bad. But hey, man, if the ultimate goal is to place the suspect in handcuffs, right, and take them out, then we're good. How you got there, we can question it all we want. I mean, that's just that's the nature of this of this job, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So in my personal experience, I've been in plenty of uses of force, as I'm sure you have also. I have never seen punching, at least from the law enforcement side, be effective. If anything, I've only ever seen it make people more combative, more defensive, and more apt to throw punches back. So in the scheme of throwing punches, if you're going to throw a strike as a distractionary strike, as a setup to a takedown, then yes, I'm all for it.
Yeah.
However, standing on top of somebody, raining bombs on them is just, honestly, when the goal is to detain them, it's a waste of time and energy and effort.
Yeah.
It's actually counterproductive to what you're trying to accomplish, because the end goal is getting them in cuffs, which would be joint manipulation, or maybe even pain compliance with joint locks.
Yeah, and on that note, Jacksonville Sheriff's Office response to resistance, right? The RTR is what they call it. Section 8, physical control. There are 6 classifications, one of them being counter moves, is what you're talking about. Techniques that impede a subject's movements towards an officer or other individuals. Got it. Such as blocking, striking, distracting, kicking, dodging, weaving, redirecting, and or avoiding. Comma, followed by appropriate controlling techniques. And right here on parentheses, it says, e.g., a subject is approaching the officer in a threatening manner, and the officer uses a vertical punch to back the subject away. And then it finishes off with, the subject becomes aggressive and throws a punch at the officer that the officer blocks. That's what they define as counter moves. Thoughts?
Yeah, again, similar to my own, opinion, if you need to throw a strike to set up something else, then that's great. However, strikes in and of themselves, when the goal is to detain somebody, it's counterproductive.
Yeah.
Fighting is chess.
Yeah.
You try one move,
Yeah.
it works, or it doesn't work, you try another one. However, repeated moves without the intended effect are just not, that shouldn't be part of your plan.
Yeah, totally. Let me move on to the beginning of this RTR, right? Order number 551. And it talks about, I found this kind of interesting, and this goes into relations to the partner officer. It says any officer who observes another officer, right, to include those from other agencies, using force that is beyond that which is objectively reasonable under the circumstances, shall safely intervene, right? And then the last, and then it says, within his scope of authority and training, to prevent the further use of such unnecessary force. These observations shall promptly be reported to a supervisor or the internal affairs unit, what it says. Any opinions about the partner officer?
The partner officer's in a rough spot, right? We're all aware of the position that he's in right now.
Blue Falcon, somewhat.
Yeah. So, but he's going to be asked his opinion on whether or not he felt that, the one officer throwing strikes was excessive. I'm sure that question's going to come across.
And unnecessary.
Right. And they're going to have to answer for that. How he answers is on him. I personally know officers that have been put in that same position. And it's not a good position to be in. Yeah. But again, this is why cops are accountable for their training, because it avoids situations like this.
Oh, no, 100%. Look, you know what? Now let's put on my IA hat, and you pretty much already kind of covered it a little bit, is we are going to cut a face sheet, is what we call it, right? It's just police jargon, but it's an internal affairs complaint investigation, and I would imagine that one of the allegations that are going to be framed is the use of unauthorized force. And according to this order that I just read, there is a possibility, and again, don't crush me for this, but there's a possibility that the partner officer might have an allegation for duty to intervene based on what you just said when it comes to whether or not he felt at the time that the force was being applied was unreasonable and unnecessary. And if so, then the department's pretty much saying that, you know what, you should have intervened. So.
Well, the video also showed the backup officer not being overly helpful too, which could have exacerbated the situation had he been a little more helpful, maybe trained a little more. I don't know his level of training, but if you were to look at it at face value, your level of training is pretty obvious in how you perform.
Yeah.
Maybe a little more training in team tactics, takedowns, defensive tactics, because defensive tactics and takedowns, wrestling, jiu-jitsu is designed just for, law enforcement purposes, is extremely effective versus having to just repeatedly punch someone with the hopes of, one, knocking them out so you can handcuff them, or two, beating the will to fight back out of them, which is just not a great strategy to begin with.
No, I'm with you, brother. Hey, look, man, if they, and again, I'm being a little critical here, sorry, JSO, but had they would have just said, all right, dude, you know what, we're fucking getting it on. We're both just gonna, you know what, let's get this dude. And that's fine. If your partner's just striking, you got to come up, partner officer, take him down, dude. And somehow, some way, start grabbing and going for the hands so we can put him in the back, cuff him up, call for in custody, drag him up, and get him out. I know it sounds simple, but it's not.
Yeah, that goes to what we've spoken about in the past too. I think in the last episode I said, you should be training for or planning for fist fight, gunfight, no fight. So when you and your partner get told by security or another bystander, hey, there's a guy over here being rowdy, he hit somebody, we need to get him out. Well, your first goal that is, all right, we got to remove this guy from the situation, right? We want to get him out of the fire and cool the situation down. So, hey, we're going to walk up, we're going to talk to him. If he's not going to do it, hey, I'm going to grab an arm, you grab an arm, we're just going to escort him out. If he fights, I'll take the top, you take the bottom, we'll just carry him out. That's an easy enough conversation to have, not walk blindly into the situation with no plan. And then when things go sideways on you, like they do, you end up having this kind of miscommunication between you and your partner. Just a little bit of prior planning in these situations pays dividends. It happened, I've seen it plenty of times.
No, 100%. And I've seen it from my end where it's an actual allegation to be framed. Tactical communication and game plan. You got to have a plan and you got to communicate. That is super, super important. It's part of de-escalation, and it should have been part of these pre-planning, talks that you should have had before you began your shift for every shift. So I appreciate that, bro. Anything else that we missed?
Not that I can think of, man. I think we're good on that one. I'm curious to see how the IA is going to play out.
Yeah, me too, man. And again, just so all viewers and people who are watching and listening is that there's a lot of reports being out there. I just read you the headlines from Yahoo Sports. It's being covered everywhere. What we do know is there was an assault committed by this particular individual, and the officers made the decision, or someone gave me the authority and the approval to get him out, to effect an arrest. So that we know. And again, we don't know what happened prior to the application of force, and we certainly don't know, post use of force. So I hope you learned something. I really thought it was very interesting. I know Pat and I said, you know what, we got to get this, bro, because it's being talked about a lot. And again, like anything else, it's all about lessons learned and to get some takeaways. And we hope to see you on the next breakdown. And please, like always, be safe out there. And don't forget to go Code 6. Thank you.